Hello everyone, my name is Julia Simpson. I'm a finance consultant and Power App enthusiast, and today I'm going to go through a cute little case scenario that I thought about with the Power Automation or Power Automate RPA processing. So please join me as we go through the whole process. Okay, so the whole process and the whole idea came about due to complaints that I've had around the financial reporter. Back in the 2012 days, if any of you guys are used to this, you'd be able to group together a bunch of reports and you could generate them as well. And once they were generated, you could export them into one lovely big Excel file. And that was fantastic, particularly around month end where you need to generate maybe 5 or 10 different reports. It's a lot of mouse clicks, it's a lot of pain to have to generate them and then export them into Excel one by one and then attach them into emails. At the moment, there's nothing really that I can do and use as an end user um, to be able to speed this process up, and there's very little development options that we can do. You can do stuff with Power BI, that's fantastic if you want to connect into the database. But you know what, just for a bit of fun, I thought I would try to figure out what I could do with the automation RPA processes for a bit of a learning process for myself and just to explore around it. Um, so to start off, you are going to need, well, you're going to need everything installed. I'm not covering how to install RPA and get it all working. I can link to, and I will link to some fantastic tutorials that I use to get myself started. I'm currently using just a standard Contoso database. It's just a normal little demo database that I have access to. And I have my RPA process desktop up and ready to go. So creating a new one is fairly straightforward. Once you're logged in, you just press on new, and then we're going to give it a name. So this one's going to be our balance sheet. And the idea behind this is we would create a whole bunch of these different RPAs to do the exporting of the reports. You could then bulk attach them into a flow and get Flow to generate the reports, export them. Actually, no, Flow won't generate them. And the reason why Flow is not going to generate them is getting automatic generation and bulk generation happening within FinOps is fairly easy and straightforward to do. You can easily generate the reports en masse whenever you need to. So we don't need to generate them, we just need to be able to export them en masse, which we can't currently do with the options that we have. There are some ideas for that in the ideas portal if you're into that, and if you're active on that, so please, I'll try and link them in as well. So this flow is what it's going to do is once these reports have been generated, a user will be able to trigger it. Maybe they trigger it via a virtual agent, or maybe they trigger it via a button, or maybe it's an automatic sort of process. So you get the reports to generate at 8 o'clock on a Monday, and then you get them to export into Excel at 9 o'clock on the Monday, and then email out to all the users. So in terms of the wider general view of how the report is going to look, to give you the slight background, here we go. Here's one that I've got it prepared already. So this one is being triggered manually by a button, and then it's going to generate the 12-month rolling report and then the actual report. These reports are going to automatically save into SharePoint, which is a fantastic little database, and you can have your integrations working quite nicely with that, and we'll then get that information before attaching it off into an email. So you would just do this for as many monthly reports that you need or weekly reports that you need. So nice and happy and straightforward on that in terms of the actual process. The harder part is getting this whole RPA process working. So as I said, we're here in RPA, we're creating it, we're giving it a name, we're going to call it balance sheet because I'm hugely creative. And we're going to click on create. That's then going to open up a second window in a moment. Here it is. Okay, and this is the RPA Desktop App. So I've been told this looks like WinAutomate. As a functional user, I've never touched WinAutomate before, so it's very much outside of my comfort zone. And this is a little bit intimidating if you're used to just the general flow or Power Automate web version. It is a little bit different, but once you get the handle of it, it's a lot of fun actually. It is a little bit frustrating and it comes with its downsides, but you know what? So do most things, particularly when they're preview. I'm expecting once this becomes general availability, it'll be quite nice. In terms of the costs of this, if you were to, for example, get the special, it does require a special license to do it, and it is a fairly expensive license. I wouldn't get that license just for this. You know, if you're doing a whole bunch of different flows and a whole bunch of different processes that did need to use the automation processes, yep, 100%, that's okay. But just consider how much it's going to cost you because it is quite an expensive little one, and you know, is it worth the cost? When the Microsoft answer to this whole solution would be to add your users into finance and operations and get them to view the reports, give them viewer only access, which you can do through security roles. Okay, so we're here in Flow, we want to get started. What you want to have started is you're going to want to have your browser with just the one tab. Now you could use Edge, you can use Chrome, you can use whichever kind of browser, well, not every kind of browser you want, you'll see in a second. I'm using Edge because I'm a glutton for punishment, but you know what? That's what we're going to do. Okay, it's nice and blank, and it does take a fair bit of fiddling around to get this all working, but once it's working, you'll be sweet. I'm going to click on web recording, and that's going to open up a new little tab. Here we go, and we can choose the different browser that we want to use. Based on my experience so far, particularly using Microsoft Edge, you only want to have the one window open, which is your starting point. So I've selected Microsoft Edge, and under Advanced, I'm going to choose the tab that I want to use. I don't want a new one, I want to use my Finance and Operations tab. I'll click on Next, and that opens me up to the tab there. So I'll just move that to the side, and I'm going to bring over the little web recorder that we have here as well. So we can see here that we've got the launch button has started, which is looking fairly good. And if we press start recording, it will then start to record the steps as we go along, and we can amend them or delete them as we click about. So it's very similar to task recording, recorder for those who are used to that, in the fact that you really, really want to know when you need to press things and where you need to go. Because if you make the mistake, you can't pick it back up again. You kind of just have to follow on and commit to it. Editing isn't as easy as well. So let's get started. We're going to press start recording. Okay. So, well, you'll know that it's working because if you hover around, you can see, you know, like the little red boxes have happened. So that's looking good. So we're going to click on the modules button. And you'll notice here that it says click an element in a web page. So that's cool, but it does say span and on-screen recording, which doesn't make a huge amount of sense to me. So I'm just going to rename things now. And that's really straightforward. So we'll just call this module because that's what we clicked on. All right, so then I go to General Ledger, rename a General Ledger, get as creative or as boring as you want here, and then financial reports. Okay. Looking good. Okay, cool. So that's financial reports. So the report we want to do is the balance sheet report. So I'm just going to click on balance sheet. And again, we'll rename this. In theory, you could probably use the same flow again and again, just replacing the balance sheet element. Okay, and then we want to click on view. Okay, so no, we only need to click view. Rightio, so view. Okay, now that we're here and we're viewing it, we need to export it, and we're just going to click on the export button. So there we go, nice little export button, and we'll rename that export. So it's a little bit fun, it's a little bit satisfying actually. Click, type, click, type. We want to expand account. Okay, and then we're going to click on export. Boop, there we go. Export. Okay, now where you save it to is all depends on you. By all means, you could use RPA to save it to your desktop and then email it out that way. I'm choosing to save it to SharePoint. The reason why I'm doing SharePoint is, again, centralized database, good for document storage. We can then use the standard flow connectors to pick up those reports and to email them out, or to maybe put them into a Teams message, post them up to a Teams chat. We've got a whole bunch of different options then if we use SharePoint. So let's click on SharePoint and rename button to SharePoint. Okay, so the default document file that we have there is fine. I'm happy with that. We just want to rename it because realistically you'd want it to be called like balance sheet and then the date and time that it was generated. So we'll say custom report name. Okay, so that's inputted in that little text section, and to get that step to appear, we need to click on the next step, which is going to be we don't want to open the file. So here we had two fields populated, which is the populated text, that looks good, and the click on the element, which was the open. Okay, cool. And then we just click on save. Okay, rightio. So this step we shouldn't really need to do. I'm going to finish my recording because again, if I had, it's not a button that we need to click if the name is unique. Okay, so that has pulled through all the information here onto the little editor view, so we can see we're going to launch and we have the different options that we have. And here we have the ability for the custom report name. So we can replace this custom report name with a variable, and that's essentially like a little field that maybe we can use in Flow. We can automatically populate something, or we can, we can feed information into this UI flow for. So to do that, I'm going to click on the plus over here and put in an input variable. Now, in terms of the type, we're just going to call this balance sheet report, or you could call it report name, or if you want to be creative, you could call it whatever you want, really. I'm just going to stick that in all over the place and we'll click on create. So that has one of my variables here, so I can start using it within the flow steps. And to do that, I'm just going to click on edit, action. Okay, and here I'm going to delete this custom report name and input in my lovely little variable. Boop. Alrighty-o. So this is running through the process and we're then going to save it. And then the last thing we need to do is close the report so that we can then do the next report. Personally, I've found that you can only have the one tab and the one browser open, that tab of that browser working with the automation things. So again, I'm using Edge so that I can use Chrome for my day-to-day work, and as the process is running, Edge can be happy and I'll work away in Chrome. I'm going to expand our web automation and choose our close. And I'm just going to drag that down to the end and press on save. Okay, so that is essentially the whole of the steps that we need to do. There's a couple of little things that we can do just to make sure that things definitely work. We can insert things called weights. And they're up the top here, and you can say essentially weight. Now, generally speaking, when you click on the report and you click on between view and export, the report has to load. Now, according to logic, it should, if we have a look here, wait for the page to load, but sometimes it doesn't always, at least in my experience so far. So I'm going to put in a wait here, and I want it to wait for 3 seconds. Okay. There's also the ability to, if something goes wrong, for it to try again. So for on this module here, I'm just going to double click on this one and put in an on error action. So on error, I want you to try one more time after 2 seconds, and we'll click on save. So, and that's put a nice little symbol there so you know what's happening. Okay, that in theory is all of my steps. So we're going to save that, and I'm going to choose to run this from the previous screen rather than this screen so that I can input in my little variable. Okay, so here we are. We're now going to press run and you can see how we go. Before pressing run, I'm just going to close down all of my tabs so that I'm nice and ready to go, and I can now press on run. So it's going to ask me for my report name, so I'll call this balance sheet 01 and we'll see how we go. Hopefully this works. So you can see here it's popped up the little browser, and this is the really cool stuff about this automation process. It's loading up the page. It's now clicked on modules, general ledger, and it's doing it quicker than what I can actually talk to you about. So it's generated this report, and it now needs to click on export. It has generated for us, and it's clicked on export, and it's now saving the file and giving it the relevant name that we have to. So it's looking really good. We are now ready to go to the next stage, which is incorporating it into our Power Automate flow. So over here, I'm just going to bring it over here now. We have our flow. So I'm just going to delete the balance sheet elements because that ruins all the fun, doesn't it? Okay, and we are going to manually trigger our flow. So over here at the moment, I have got it to, we're just going to enter in the names. But as I said, you generally wouldn't want that. You'd probably have a fixed name and then you'll put a date at the end of it. So I'm not going to add it in for our balance sheet, and we're going to do that as part of the steps. So we've got our manual trigger. Again, you could, as I said, you could have a button, you could have it just periodically happen. And we're now going to add another action in, and we're selecting UI flows. That's the one we want. Okay, so now we have 3 different actions we can choose from, and we want to use the Power Automate desktop. Okay, so that's now loading, and we'll just rename it now because, it's good practice so we know what we're doing. We'll call this one balance sheet. Okay, and I can select the UI flow that I have, which is, again, creatively called balance sheet. How many times can I say balance sheet, hey? We want this to be an attended row, and it's going to ask us what the name needs to be. So under instruct, I'm going to put in a little formula here, and I want it to be a use the concatenate formula because I want to add in just a set field of text called balance sheet and then the date strand. So we will put in, we've selected concat and it's added in the little brackets for us. I can put in my double quotes because I want it to be text and call it balance sheet and end text. So that's my little text element. I'll then do a comma, and now I need to put in my date and time. So I'm going to just use the UTC now formula, which means it will just bring you through the date and time in a nice little string format. You do open and close bracket. Okay, so it's upset, and that is because I did double quotes, not single quotes. I should be doing single quotes if I am correct. We'll click on OK. Alrighty-o. So that's brought in our name for our report. It's just going to be balance sheet and the date and time. Happy days. So that will run off our little flow, which is the first step. From there, we need to get the report. So I'm going to add in another action, and I'm going to get that link from SharePoint. Okay, here we are, and file. We are getting a file using path. That's the option that I'm choosing. You can do whichever one of the get actions that you would like. It does save it as a document into the folders, so just something to be aware of. Okay, so now I would essentially just go through and select the file and select one of the default example reports. Now that I have that, I need the name to be the name that we used up the top here. So what I can do is I can just copy this formula. Nice and straightforward. Let's be lazy where we can. You could actually put a variable and just refer back to that variable, but for the purpose of this, let's not do that, hey? And we're just going to delete this element and put in our lovely little formula. Okay, now that we got that, we have to kind of do a little bit of an awkward delete because it loves to bring it back in. Okay, cool. And we have now got an R file, so we're just going to rename that again, get balance sheet. Okay, cool. So we have our balance sheet information. We can now send our email. And this is where we can use the advanced options to add in our different attachments. So I have, attachment, this one of the reports, another one of the reports. I'm going to go back and copy that lovely little formula because we're being lazy. And you know what? I've done it 3 times now, so it probably is worthwhile using a variable. But we're here now, we've committed, we'll just continue on. And then under contents, we're going to use the get balance sheet file contents. And that's as simple as what the flow needs to be. I mean, you could do a whole bunch of extra in here as well. We could add in a updated Teams chat or updated Teams message, send some sort of fun little dynamic cards, update a BI report. You've got a whole bunch of different options here. That's the beauty of flow. We'll click on save, and we will test this and that it works. So you'll all hopefully notice the incredibly smooth transition that I had with this one, and that's essentially because I got some problems with my flow. If you guys are really well known in flow, you'll probably notice the points that I did wrong. They're mostly around SharePoint. So here I am generating the flow. I'm entering in my information at the front, and we are getting ready to run it. I didn't change any of the RPA elements themselves. I was just the SharePoint element and the name element I had to change because the default time frame comes up. So as you can see here, we've triggered the flow. I end up inserting a variable in, and we're now doing the magical little RPA bit. I love seeing the yellow boxes move around. I think it's really cool, and it's going to export our first report being the 12-month rolling report. Overall, I think this functionality is a lot of fun, particularly to play around with. I'm not 100% sure how production ready it is yet, but it's a good bit of fun. It's also a lot of frustration. Building this, I have done many, many attempts at getting it right and clicking on the right box on the right time. In theory, it all sounds simple, and if you have a look through this, you can see a nice, easy sort of click. But in practice, there was quite a few attempts that I had at getting this. And to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you what I did wrong the first time compared to the second time. So here we are, we're generating the second report, exact same process, we're just literally clicking on a different report and giving it a different name. So that's nice and happy as well. Something I have noticed, and you'll notice it here as well, is that the report actually only took, or the flow took itself, 30 seconds to generate, but the flow itself is going to go on for quite a while and before it moves on to the next step. This may be a temporary thing, or it may be how I've just created it. Here we are on the third step, the one that we did in our recording, which is generating our balance sheet. So again, we're opening up the browser, we're going into the modules button, into general ledger, and then financial reports. We're clicking on the balance sheet and viewing it, and then exporting it, just like you saw before. Amending our parameters, clicking export, and you'll notice here that we put in the date. That is one of the things that I had to change. I had to format the date so that it came out in a pretty little format rather than just the UTC date and time format, because it had dots in the UTC format, which was, as you know, if you have dot in your title, it interferes with the elements. So remember that, and you'll see here that it got all the reports really quickly from SharePoint, and it then sent me off an email, which I'll bring up in a second. See the free reports, all emailed off and all happy. Overall, fantastic tool, fair bit of fun, a lot of frustrations on how to use, and definitely something that particularly a super user or someone that is a bit more techy would definitely get in and enjoy. Um, the only question is around the cost, which again, if it's one of your widest gaming power platform, it's definitely worth it. So, thank you very much for watching. Sorry, it's a little bit choppy. This is my first video and my first time editing, but I will hope to put up more of these, and I've got a few more ideas of how we could use UI flows within finance and operations that I'm going to look into, and then just generalize. I'll do some updates about particular finance functionality that really gets me excited. Hope you have a lovely morning, evening, or afternoon.